Hey, welcome. This is Efkan. I'm a psychologist and I live with borderline personality disorder. If you're new to schema therapy and you want to know in max 15 minutes why it's one of the most effective therapy forms for BPD, you are at the right address. This video is meant to give you a general overview of schema therapy. But since schema therapy is such a jewel in the treatment of BPD, each part of this therapy form will later get its own in-depth video. Okay, so let's get into it. Schema therapy is basically a needs therapy. So the idea behind it is we all have core emotional needs. Think of them like emotional vitamins. If we do not get enough of them, we do not just feel sad, our development from childhood to adulthood gets seriously disrupted. In schema therapy, there are 5 basic needs. They are the following. Number 1 is secure attachment. The second one is autonomy, competence, and identity. The third one is freedom to express valid needs and emotions. Fourth is spontaneity and play. Fifth is realistic limits and self-control. So how do these needs relate to schemas? What are schemas? So as babies and kids, we're trying to make sense of the world. A lot of things are coming at us through our senses, like through our eyes, our ears, etc. And if every single time we had to think about whether what we're experiencing is correct, starting from scratch, without our brain helping us by seeing patterns and categorizing information, we would just lose our mind because there's simply too much stuff happening around us. So the brain does something smart. Every time something happens again and again, the brain makes a mental note. It goes, okay, because this has happened so many times, this is what this means. And in that moment, the brain forms a schema. And it's not just a rational thing, like understanding information and putting it into a category. Schemas also have an emotion element. They have bodily sensations tied to them, like, for example, heaviness, pressure, or tightness. Because, think about it. Often we feel something physically before we understand it rationally. This happens because schemas are also stored in our bodies, as it were, as bodily sensations, emotions, and memories, not just as concepts and ideas. So once a schema is stored, it starts to work like a lens. From then on, we use it as a filter for all the information coming at us. So a schema is not good or bad in itself. It is just a lens that is shaped by the interaction between our experiences and our temperament. In schema therapy, we have a total of 18 maladaptive schemas. One example of a maladaptive schema is abandonment. This means the people I care about will not stay with me. So as you can see, as adults, if we have such a schema, it can really shoot us in the foot because there are loads of people out there who won't abandon us. But if every time we go out there and with everybody we meet, we think they will abandon us eventually, this is going to cause us big problems connecting with other people. But there's good news. The good news is if we consistently find the opposite of a schema to be true, through experience, over and over, schemas can actually change. But, here's the but, unfortunately, once the lens is there, it takes work to change because there's this bias where we automatically interpret things as if a schema is true. Now that we know what needs and maladaptive schemas are, let's talk about what we do when a maladaptive schema is activated. This is where coping styles come into play. So in our daily life, what tends to happen is that when our maladaptive schemas are activated, we try to cope with it in three broad ways. This is what you, for example, also see in nature documentaries. When animals are in real danger, they do this thing that is called run, fight, or freeze. This is basically a fast and automatic way of coping. They're just designed so we can survive the moment. They're not meant for healing or really solving a problem. So this way of coping that we share with other animals sacrifices effectiveness and accuracy for safety. In schema therapy, these are called a little bit different. They're called avoidance, overcompensation, and surrender. But basically, they're the same thing. So avoidance is flight. It means I do not want to feel this, so I escape. Coping style 2 is overcompensation. This is fight. It means instead of being vulnerable and honest about not having our needs be met, we go on the attack. We try to control, we blame someone, things like that. So in that moment, what we really want, if we're really honest with ourselves, is often reassurance and closeness. But this is very scary for people like us, if we're really honest with ourselves. So sometimes we just want to, we don't want to be vulnerable. We just want to get it by just forcing someone or take it out of them by force or something, That's why we tend to do that. Coping style 3 is surrender. This is like freeze. It means I believe the schema, I accept the message as truth. For example, someone does not text back and we go, of course, they don't care. I knew it. I am not worthy anyway. So, up until this point, we have discussed the 5 core needs, the 18 maladaptive schemas, and the 3 coping styles. So in terms of how this all works together, we are almost there. The last crucial piece in schema therapy is something called modes. Okay, so there are 4 types of modes, and a mode is a part of us that temporarily but fully takes over. So how to illustrate this? Imagine a bus and a road, and we're on a journey to get our needs met. Inside that bus, there are multiple drivers with different personalities. But since there's only one steering wheel, only one driver can drive at a time. So what are the 4 modes exactly? Number 1 is child modes. Number 2 is coping modes. Number 3 is critic modes. Number 4 is the healthy adult mode. It is too complex right now to go deeper into the details of the modes, but rest assured that in the future, a full video will be dedicated just to the modes under the Schema Therapy playlist on this channel. So the last question we'll tackle in this video is, how does Schema Therapy deal with all of the things we have discussed so far? So it uses 4 broad interventions, okay? And within each, there are many techniques. The 4 broad interventions are therapy relationship techniques, also called limited reparenting, cognitive techniques. 3 is experiential techniques, which I have a hard time sometimes pronouncing. 4, behavioral pattern breaking techniques. And in this segment, I mainly want to focus on limited reparenting and experiential techniques, because this is what makes schema therapy really special for BPD. It puts a lot of emphasis on the emotional part of BPD problems without getting stuck on the logical side of trying to change patterns by being logical. So what is limited reparenting? In schema therapy, the relationship between us and the therapist becomes a big part of the treatment. The therapist is more active, more involved, and more direct than in any other therapy forms, because he or she is trying to meet our unmet needs in the therapy room. So what does that look like? For example, if we panic, the therapist puts a lot of effort into soothing us by, for example, stepping in and saying, "Of course you are scared. You are not alone right now. We will go through it together." Also, in schema therapy, it is recommended to actively create a relationship between the client and the therapist, in which the therapist shows that he or she actually cares, and not just what they call playing the role of a therapist. Because without it, limited reparenting just can't take place. A therapist in schema therapy also tries to teach boundaries. For example, what they feel comfortable with, what we can and can't do with them. So you can see it as like a loving parent who also has to put some boundaries. And this is done because they try to teach us in therapy that we can learn how to set boundaries in a reasonable way. So that means without being too harsh and without losing self-respect for ourselves. Because what tends to happen is that we often either set a boundary that's too harsh, or we lose self-respect because our boundary is just too loose. So the second group of techniques that make schema therapy so cool are the experiential techniques. One powerful way of doing this is called image rescripting. So we start with a recent situation that really triggered us. We discuss in depth what happened and how it makes us feel, etc. And then we try to recreate the situation as vividly as possible in our imagination. Then it's when it gets really interesting. Because once we did that, we will follow that feeling back to an earlier memory where we felt the same as a child. And then the therapist steps in and protects us and tries to meet our needs in that moment and actively deal with the person harming us. Or use fantasy elements like putting a barrier between us and the bad person. That's also possible. Later, why is this done? Later, when our healthy adult mode is stronger, then we can enter the image as our adult self and do the protecting and caring for ourselves. That is why that technique is used. So in the future, we can do that for ourselves. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for watching. The next video in the Schema Therapy series will be about the 5 core needs. You will be able to find that video on the playlist on this channel. The playlist is called Schema Therapy series, and the 5 core needs video will be the second video in the series, the first being this one. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.